Hello and welcome to this tutorial video. My name is Lars Eichstädt, and in this tutorial video I will show you how to create a sustain line in the strings. So, how to make a sustain line in the strings sound realistic. So this is the first video of the tutorial series on East-West Quantum Leap Symphonic Orchestra, and if you're new to the series, you can also go to the Facebook page, Virtual Music Tutorials, and find out more about the series and get updates about current progress of upcoming videos. And I also recommend to watch the introduction video I produced on the series, where I explain in detail how the series is organized and how we will go through this library. So yeah, we will start in the string section using the sustain articulation because it's the most easiest one. I provided a MIDI file where the sustain line is rendered in. So there's a MIDI file of the sustain line we see right here. You then have to set up your Symphonic Orchestra inside your sequencer. If you have Cubase or FL Studio, you can also take a look at the channel. There are 2 videos about how to set up Symphonic Orchestra in Cubase and also in FL Studio. So, and there's also a list in the video description of the articulations that are used. So then set up everything accordingly, and then we can get started. Good. Okay, so let's before we do anything else, of course, let's listen to what we have right now. So we can definitely hear we have to do a lot to this little music piece to make that sound realistic. Well, the first thing we may notice that are nearly no dynamics. It's very straight, and also it feels very robotic. So before we get started, really, let's ask us another question. What makes actually the realism of music or of virtual produced music? I call it a principle called I call it perfection with imperfection. What I mean with that is that the key to make virtual music sound realistic is to add all the little tiny imperfections human playing produces, because that's what makes the music at the end sound realistic. Because right now what we have here right now is every note has the exact same length as the other ones and all start at the exact same time. So they are all at the same time they're starting, and these ones are all starting at the same time, and that's actually not happening in an orchestra. In every orchestra all over the world, there are always very, very slight offsets between the different notes played. They're of course just milliseconds, not very much, but they are there, and we have to simulate these human imperfections in our musical pieces, and that's actually it can be sometimes a lot of work, but that's what we're looking at in the coming videos through every articulation that's inside of this library, and there we will take a look at what we can do to make it sound better. So, but now let's get started with the sustain line. So the first thing that we will do right now is first of all use the velocity to give the melody a general shape. So what we will do right now is, yeah, first of all, I select the whole piece here, all of the little objects. Yeah, one thing I want to add before we get started. I want to create these videos cross-platform, so I won't use any functions that are specific for Cubase. Yeah, because I want that everything I'm explaining here is also possible in every other sequencer. Yeah, so that's one thing right here, so you don't have to worry if you're using Logic or Pro Tools or I don't know what, that you might come to a point where you can't replicate what I'm doing here. All the principles I'm showing you right here are, yeah, possible in every other sequencer. Good, so what we're doing right now is first of all alter the velocity of all of the instruments. So what we are going to do is first of all, if it's possible in your sequencer, then you can select all of them and alter all at once. Otherwise you have to click everyone's and make every object separately. So what we are going to do now is try to do it like this in one part here. So now we have here the let's get rid of the transport window. So excuse me. So yeah, so now here is our sustain line. So what we're going to do right now is what I thought about this sustain line, that it starts right here and then it gets a little bit lower in dynamics, and then a little bit like you see it here, we will also adjust the velocity. So we will go now and first of all say we want to make it all go a little bit down like so, and then finally slowly rising up again, and then maybe let's make it really loud at the end, so that when we now listen we should already have a little change, only a little bit, but I hope that we can hear it. Actually very difficult to hear, so let's try to make it even stronger. Oh yeah, okay, I see the reason. It's actually because, yeah, in my sequencer in Cubase apparently it's not possible to edit everyone, all of them at once. So okay, let's do it here with the basses like this. So then let's close this part, go to the cellos, and yeah, here now we can see here the velocity didn't change. So here we will do the same thing as well, and it doesn't really matter if the velocities aren't at the exact same value as they are in the basses. That's actually really good, because that also gives us little variation, of course, and that's really what happens. Sorry, you can test that, for example, when you play some chords and a melody on your MIDI keyboard, and then take a look at the velocity. You will see that the chords, that the notes of the chord aren't all played at the exact same value of velocity. Of course, if you use a keyboard with no fixed velocity, then of course, if it is fixed velocity, then of course you won't see it, but normally you have using keyboards would have touch sensitivity, yeah, and there you will see the differences between the different notes. So we will work ourselves now through the different groups here. alter it a little bit. And sometimes what we can already hear here is that we have to be careful with some instrument groups, because on some instrument groups changes of the velocity have a greater effect than on others. So here we can see they get very fast, very low when we alter the velocity. So we have to be careful now with altering them, that we don't make some instruments at some points so low, so quiet that we don't hear them. So now let's see if we now altered them all a little bit, and now let's see how this will sound like now. So now we have a little bit of dynamic. But right now at the moment it is still very robotic, and it's only one step right now for our realism. So what we will do then is now offset the notes and create this offset that I was talking about a minute ago. So let's go again into the parts and turn off any snapping that may be activated. Zoom in quite a lot and then start doing this. And that can be sometimes really annoying to make this offset like this. Of course, if your sequencer has the possibility of making slight variations automatically, then of course you can use that. I could use it as well because Cubase has it as well, but as I already said, I won't use it, because if you have a sequencer that may not have this possibility, I want that all of you who have another sequencer can also apply what they see here. So so I am creating now here the offset, and as you might see, I give them a little bit variation. Sometimes there's a not quite a big offset, but sometimes like here we have actually very much. So we could also of course make them a little bit longer at the end. And let's go to the cellos and do the same thing there as well. Move them across some, and also of course alter the beginning. Also, that's something that I forgot when I started. I made offset on every other note, but I forgot to alter the beginning. So yeah, that's also something that you shouldn't forget. Also alter the first note. And of course, if we are now finished in a couple of minutes, then of course we have to listen and we have to see if it was too much offset, or maybe even not enough. So we have to see now what will happen if we are listening to this. I also noticed, so let's go to the violas, that you can quickly overdo this offsetting of the notes. So you have to be careful not to offset them too much, because then you can sometimes come into trouble and get the problem that it seems like the players didn't play it using a metronome. So that's also not what we want. That is then too much imperfection. Okay, so let's go over to the violins and let's offset them. And normally, of course, if you have possibilities to make the variations automatically by your sequencer, then of course do it. I'm doing it normally as well, but here I don't do it, as I already said. So yeah, I'm curious how this will sound like, because It's every time, it's never the same actually. It can be every time a little bit different. Um, so sometimes it works right from the beginning, the offsetting. I say, well, that's good like this, and we can move on to the second part. But yeah, it takes a while, unfortunately. You doing virtual music takes a while, needs patience. And sometimes I get to a point where I say, I don't want to do this anymore. But then, yeah, I listen to the end result and then I say again, well, it's worth it. And I think we already overdid it very much, I think. Let's listen, but I think yeah, I think we can already see it's way too much. But let's see. Maybe, well, of course, there can be sometimes, yeah, cases where you just want that sound so that it, yeah, let's say flows some kind of flows more into one according to another one. So now let's see what happened. And actually, it's not that bad, I have to say. Well, for what I wanted to create with this line, it should be a little bit more emotional, and so for in my case, I like it. Um, what we have to do right now is, as we may heard, turn on the snapping here as well, that at the end, there's one part that really hits us in the face when we now listen to this one more time. I don't know if this let's see if there's a violin. I don't know it. I think it was the 18. Let's see one more time. Or the viola. Sometimes I don't know. Yeah, the violas were the violas. Okay. Yeah. So we have always to look for a balance, of course, and that's of course the sometimes the thing that I spend hours with tweaking and adjusting so that we yeah, have a nice balance to it. And be sure when you really start working with symphonic orchestra, you will spend hours and hours doing just that. But believe me, um, stick to it. Don't stop at a point because you say, Jesus, I just can't. I just can't move on. Then, yeah, take the music, take the piece apart for a couple of days, but then go again and start again and tweak and do as much as possible until you're satisfied. And at the end, you will see that it was worth it, especially when sometimes people are then asking you where you had the orchestra playing your piece. And that's sometimes then the case when I think that's now really, it was really worth to work. If people really think it was a real orchestra playing there, then you did everything right. Okay, and one thing that we can also see here, when we offset, that we can sometimes offset them the same way, so that actually they start nearly at the same time again, just a little bit offset. And we can see this right here. If we take a look at these violins, the violas, basses, and the 11 violins, that they start yeah, nearly at the same time. So what we will do to this, of course, we can go in and change this, and we should really change this, and I think here even more, to get the variation here, and not have everything right together. And maybe here we can make this note go a little bit more over like here, and listen again. And there comes to the point where you think that could be too much, so let's listen again. And there we can hear, here is something that is not quite right. So let's listen once again from the beginning, and let's see which parts are already good and which ones we have to adjust. Actually, it's the only part in the middle that I like. The other ones seem to be quite, well, I don't know, it's too much offset, I think. Yeah, it's way too much. So, of course, then we redo everything a little bit. So, too much offset is also bad. So, do it in a nice way, not too much. Always. Sometimes it's really better to do only little changes like so. Go a little bit to the left here. Yeah. The reason I'm not cutting these videos here, really show you the whole process, is that you get also get an idea of how to deal with such problems. And you see, it's actually just trial and error a little bit. We can see because of the offset now, it seems that the players aren't really on the metronome anymore. So yeah, we can see here, don't adjust too much, don't overdo it. I did it right here, so that's how you shouldn't do it. Demonstration of what offset is too much. So yeah, really little tiny bits sometimes. Oh, we're at the end already. Let's see. There are some that aren't. And it can take a while, of course, it can take a while. So, you can see it's not good to do too much. Yeah, so that's then basically how you work ourselves through everything. It's necessary, and that's the beginning. And the better you work at this point, the more time you spend also on this, the better it will be later on when we start using some MIDI automation, because this is also a big field. There is a lot of things that you can automate in Symphonic Orchestra. We will use two knobs, or don't say knobs, control changes. So yeah, so now let's listen once again. Yeah, and that's better now. So now we have a little offset. It still sounds a little robotic, so what we can do is now see maybe if we can adjust the velocity again a little bit. But in our case, what I then want to do right now is starting the MIDI automation. So what is important right now, that you set up in your sequencers two automation controls or tracks, wherever it's done in your sequencer software, and there create one track for CC1 and one for CC11 for all of the five tracks. Yeah, if you have Cubase and FL Studio, you can watch once more the. Oh, sorry, I hit the microphone. I didn't want. So yeah, you can go to the YouTube channel and there watch the video about how to set up Symphonic Orchestra in Cubase. And if you have Cubase and FL Studio, on these two videos, I also show you how to set up these MIDI control changes. So in our case, we use the quick controls here. Oh, and I see I didn't set them up. That's really bad, actually. So I will do this right now. Unfortunately, I didn't found a way to set up the quick controls once and then apply to the other ones. So if there's someone who knows how it's done, yeah, it would be really great if you maybe could answer that question for me. You can, as I already said in the introduction video, as usual, if you have any questions, suggestions, critique, whatever, you can write me an email at wmtutorials@live.de. So yeah, and there you can tell me everything you want. Okay, so now let's start with the MIDI automation. What I recommend is using a MIDI controller to alter the expression and modulation, because it's often better and more you get more a better feeling when you move a fader than using the mouse and drag the knob up or down, or the control slide or whatever. So let's very quickly let's take the basses and make it cycle, and well, I have to quickly enable cycle. So, and then now I will show you what happens with what happens if you change the expression. So you have to also at this point here as well be careful not to overdo it, but right now what we will do is now give them some sort of character. So what we had right now, where it has at a constant dynamic, we will then now make it little crescendo or decrescendo to eliminate this little bit robotic and mechanical feeling. So we will just start with I tried different ways. Right now I'm doing it soloing the tracks. In this case I solo the tracks now, and of course enable automation, and then we start automate the basses now. Okay, so now let's see. There it is. Let's see how it sounds like. And actually, what we have here, for example, that's a little bit. It sounds a little bit strange here that it's going up again and then down. So like this. And then let's get out of this one. Let's take the cellos, and here disable automation in case that we don't accidentally write automation for this track again. Sometimes this can happen. And now before we start creating any automation, we then also test a little bit here at the cellos how we're going to do this. So mainly I'm doing 2 times normally, and then I click on record and record the automation. So let's start here again. It's difficult to make a nice transition between this note and this note because the velocity changes are here very, very strong. So in this case, what I then do is just decrease the velocity a little bit to make it a little bit easier for me, and then try again. And like this it's working. So then I record it again. Like this, and then we start tweaking again because I don't really like how this is working with these 2 ones. So now we have to see if we make the right transition to these ones. Let's see. This should do it. But we can also here take the velocity a little bit down, like so, and also bring them right together so that we don't have this gap there. I didn't notice that. Sometimes we can also, it helps to bring it down a little bit right before the note ends, and then let it go up again and then slowly go down. So that helps. So then let's move on to the violas and see what we'll do there. I'll also select it. Because what you also always have to find out how much expression changes or what amount of change of expression really affects the sound, because sometimes, as you can see with the violas, I have to move the fader quite a lot to get differences in sound, and using the basses sometimes it's only quite a few centimeters or half of a centimeter sometimes really makes big differences. So right now I think that I found what I want for this one, and let's start also sometimes around 100 and start recording. And this one here I really have to alter because I don't like what I did here. So because here is something that just doesn't sound right. It's too much the same at 2 points from the automation data. So let's see. And yeah, what is important when you create the automation? It's really important that you try to I always try to imagine being a being a player in the orchestra, and I always try to imagine how would I play this phrase, and when would I get lower, a little bit more quiet, and when will I pull a little bit stronger with the bow, and it's yeah, yes, difficult to give some kind of general rule of thumb to do the automation. It really depends on your piece, on the character. If you have a really aggressive um, line, then you wouldn't do that much of automation here. It will be only a little bit more straight to give it or sometimes you could also do, of course, very strong automation with just for demonstration. We won't use this here, but you could do so if you have sometimes an aggressive track. You could do really something like this to really go down and up and give really strong results. We could listen to this, how this sounds like here. I will then redo this. It can sometimes this can be quite good, sometimes not. So let's see. And here we can also adjust the velocity a little bit down so that it matches more the sound of this one. Because it's not such a fluent transition, so sometimes I then, as you can see right now, is change the offset. And yeah, what in our case for the emotion and sustain line, for example, what I do is, for example, during a part of a note, I often let it make a little crescendo, right, and then go down very much and then fade in at the second note, for example, in this one, because this here is the, let's say, the most emotional part. So I really want this to start very low and then slowly rise. And sometimes if you notice that the transition between two notes doesn't really sound okay, what you can do is then go down with the automation and try using this. Sometimes this helps to make the transition. So as you can see, it often helps to go a little bit down at the end of the note and then start. So we can here go. Yes, okay. And then, so you see, sometimes there are tracks that you really, yeah, take a little time until they're okay. Yeah, so the same way now with the violins. Let's see what we can do to this. Okay, so let's start. So what I did here very much, that sometimes yeah, you sometimes really have to do this, is especially here at the end of these notes, really I went almost down again and then really up. So sometimes you really have to be very dynamic in the expression, and it really depends a lot of the instrument. So in our case here we had the violins. There we needed to do a lot to them with a lot of expression here, as we can see. So let's listen now. And we could say, yeah, it's a little bit too much going down, so let's try it again. Okay. Here, for example, we have also the case where we really need to go down to make the transition right. Here we can also adjust the velocity a little bit to make it sound more bright. And here, as we can see, also make the offset a little bit down again. Here also the velocity, because the attack here is too strong. Like so. And let's go to the 18 violins. And because these are the violins as well, I assume that we could follow the curve of these ones pretty much. So let's make a quick run through, but I think we can do it as, yeah, nearly the same as there as well. So let's do. Yeah, and it's nearly the same. So let's start. And here we also have to adjust the end here. So we will make it also a little bit like the 18 violins. No, sorry, the 11. And here also we have to adjust a little bit the velocity, that it's more organic. And here also be careful with the offset sometimes. You can also contribute that the transition isn't quite right. So and let's see, we have to go down a little bit more at this point, I think. Yeah, and now comes the special part where you unsolo everything and listen to the whole track now and see how everything sounds together, and hope, of course, that you don't have to tweak that much. So now let's have a listen, if you can say that. So, and that is a difference to the beginning, I would say. Sometimes you may notice that this part here could need a little bit of tweaking. So let's listen. Sometimes when you hear everything together, the fall down of the expression at the end of a note can be sometimes sound not that good together with the other ones. So sometimes you can see that if it feels too much the same, then what you can do is alter some of the automation of two instruments. In our case, we use the 11 violins and violas. And there make the automation a little bit more straight compared to the other one, so you have a little bit of movement in one automation and in some a little bit less. And yeah, we can also see if we then now can offset once more a little bit, because it seems to me that they are not that great connected sometimes. So I now check the offsets and alter them a little bit once more. See if it helps. So, but now let's listen once again, and I think we could call that finished for this tutorial. So now what I will do now then is now export another MIDI file now with all of the automation here again. Hope that the automation will be exported correctly, so that you then can load up this MIDI file once again in your own sequencer, and of course start tweaking again and think and see what happens if you change something. You can record the automation yourself once more, and maybe you can make it even better than here. I mean, here I did it very quickly, because I can make tutorials that go 2 hours long, where you just see me tweaking and doing things. And yeah, so of course now what you can then do is take a look at the mixing, and so that the balance is much better. Here I think sometimes the basses are a little bit too strong, but to my mind it sounds quite good. So yeah, that finishes this first tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something, and yeah, write me an email if you want to, if you have something to say for me for the video, or also write something at the Facebook page, of course. And yes, that's all from now, and thanks for watching.